Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtapraeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. So continuing with the discussion on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Swami, March 1974, Prabhupada is in Mumbai, or Bombay that. One day when Prabhupada criticized a favorite hero, a certain doctor argued back, criticizing Prabhupada's statement that the absolute truth was Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The doctors and others asserted that the absolute truth was many things and that ultimately everything was one. The devotees could barely restrain themselves, but still Prabhupada always treated these men as his friends. So, if I'm not wrong, this doctor is Dr. Patel, and he would go with Prabhupada on morning walks in Juhu, whenever Prabhupada was in Juhu. And he would have discussions, arguments or discussions with Prabhupada. But Prabhupada always treated him as like his younger brother. That's how Prabhupada called him. And he always appreciated Prabhupada answer. It's not like he was against it, but he had always had his own viewpoint. And this thing, everything was one. This is whole Mayavad philosophy, and it's so deep-rooted in pretty much all over. It just sounds so good, but it's not. It's bogus philosophy. But it just sounds good and people like to follow it. Everything is one. Why everything is one? Early the next morning in his room, however, Prabhupada told his disciples that these men were actually Mayavadis. We'll now have a program, he said, where we will walk on the beach, but we will only chant Hare Krishna. If they want to talk, we'll just chant, and we'll all chant only. If they wish to, they can walk with us. Prabhupada, the devotee, said, they'll be restless if we do that. Even if they don't chant, said Prabhupada, if they only hear, it will be beneficial for them. Mayavadi philosophy is very dangerous. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, whoever hears it is doomed. Mayavad bhashya sunile hoy sarvanash. That was Mahaprabhu said. Hoy sarvanash. Because one just doesn't engage in devotional service after that. And another place it is mentioned that those who really follow this Mayavad philosophy, they're in so much of ignorance that the next birth they take as trees or plants. Plants are in so much of ignorance. So these Mayavadis, they become plants or trees. And then slowly, they get into their evolution cycle again. A devotee asks, why a Mayavadi would disguise himself as a Krishna Bhakta? They do it, Prabhupada said, to get popular reception for being liberal to all. But if a woman says that she is very liberal and accepts any man, that may seem to be a liberal proposal, but it's not good. We will read the Krishna book on the walk, Prabhupada said. I'm walking with my disciples. If these men like, they can join and hear. But if they want to ask questions, they must accept the Guru's answer without argument. Is that all right? The next morning, although the usual challengers did not join the walk, Prabhupada had Giraj read aloud from the Krishna book. Suddenly, Prabhupada sighted the familiar group of speculators approaching from the opposite direction. But as they drew closer, they purposely turned aside so as to avoid Prabhupada. One of them came over, however, and representing the entire group informed Prabhupada they were not going to walk with him anymore. They had met and decided that the conversations with him created too much argument and criticism. India has many saints, the man added. Prabhupada says, I'm the policeman, Prabhupada said, and I have to catch the thief. After a few days, the same group rejoined Prabhupada on his walk, and the discussions continued as before. Some of Prabhupada's disciples remained disturbed, but Srila Prabhupada was jolly, correcting his friends like an older brother, teaching them pure Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada would take a breakfast of fruits and nuts. Around 11 a.m., he would sit on the veranda in his gamcha while a servant massaged him with mustard oil. During the massage, Prabhupada would often speak with one or two of his Bombay devotees, giving them pertinent instructions. After lunch, he would rest an hour or two and on arising, take a glass of fresh coconut water or sugarcane juice. In the evening, he would meet guests and then around 10 p.m. take rest. At 1 a.m., he would rise and sit at his desk, beneath a tent-like covering of mosquito netting, and dictate his translations and purports to Chaitanya Charitamrita until time for his morning walk. So that was his schedule. He was 78 years old, and this is taking rest for only 3 hours at night and maybe 1 hour in the daytime. Several times a day, Prabhupada would call for Giriraj and other Bombay managers to confer on the latest strategy in securing permission to build the temple. When Prabhupada's Bombay friends would visit, they would often find him on the roof of the tenement, sitting on white cotton sheeting and leaning on white bolsters, preaching the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita by the hour. He would ask his visitors to help him solidly establish Krishna consciousness in Bombay. One day during the massage, Prabhupada confided to his servant, "Most men are retired at my age. I do not want to manage anymore. I just want to do some writing." Prabhupada asked if there was some place in the world he would go for 6 months, a place he would be all alone, where no one would come to disturb him, and where he would not get any mail. Not easy for Prabhupada. He wanted to write, he wanted to give us all these books. He wanted to give more actually. He just didn't get time. Prabhupada's servant suggested Tehran. Prabhupada considered it, then suggested New Vrindavan. He spoke of Mahatma Gandhi, who could not even sleep at night because people were always after him, even though he traveled incognito. That very day, a letter came from Bhagwan in Paris, inviting Prabhupada to tour his ISKCON centers in Europe. Immediately, Prabhupada was enlivened at this invitation. He said he would go. But earlier today, his servant said he wanted to go away and be alone. Prabhupada laughed. That will not be possible for me in this lifetime. Better I keep traveling and die on the battlefield. For a warrior, it is glorious to die on the battlefield, is it not? Traveling around the world once or twice a year had become Prabhupada's routine. In describing his own spiritual master, he had written, "Hindus are not allowed to cross the ocean, but you send your devotees overseas to preach." The injunction for Hindus not to cross the ocean was to protect them from leaving the pious land of India, since so many Indians gave up their culture when they went abroad. When Prabhupada had been a small child, one of his uncles had suggested he one day go to London and become a lawyer. But Prabhupada's father had protested. He did not want his son to be exposed to the sinful ways of the West. Years later, Prabhupada had gone to London as a preacher to change the ways of the sinful. For this reason, the Vaishnava should travel. Yes, we should travel to preach everywhere. And Prabhupada showed by his example. And not just for Hindus, yes, it was a common saying, but for sannyasis, definitely, do not go. And sannyasis should only travel walking. Sannyasis should not wear any stitched clothes. Sannyasis should not wear any shoes. But before Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, he just broke all these rules for sannyasis. He came to Radhakund at that time, 1930s, in a car, wearing a coat, because it was cold, Kartik time, it was cold here. And he was I don't know, he was openly criticized, or Babaji was saying something in the back, what kind of sannyasi he is. And he was wearing shoes also. Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, he came and he gave lectures. He said, preacher, we are preachers. Whatever is available, we have to adopt. And Prabhupada went further. He went in aeroplanes, everywhere. So many times. Like it is said, twice a year he would go around the world. He went in airplanes to foreign countries and opened temples and stayed in those temples. And sometimes his only lady disciples would be there. Sannyasi is not supposed to be in the same building with this lady, with the ladies. But he would stay because men would be out there in the Sankirtan. That's why he was revolutionary. He was definitely revolutionary. Just before starting his European tour, Prabhupada explained to several devotees in his room that they also should travel and preach. He said they should do so while they were young, and when they were old and matured in Krishna consciousness, they could go to Mayapur, retire, and simply chant Hare Krishna. Of course, for myself, Prabhupada added, I'm not so mature. Prabhupada is saying that. The devotees were silent a moment, but then one ventured. But Srila Prabhupada, if you say that you're not mature, then how can we ever think that we are old or mature enough to retire? Prabhupada smiled and said that they would have to decide for themselves. But he was not mature enough. Tamal Krishna Goswami said, then we will also never become so mature that we can retire. April 18th. Before going to Europe, Prabhupada responded to an invitation from his devotees in South India to attend a three-day Pandal festival in Hyderabad. No sooner did he arrive at the airport in Hyderabad, however, than a group of reporters asked him for a press conference. Prabhupada consented, and the reporter opened with a technical philosophical question, inquiring whether Prabhupada's philosophy was Advaita or Dvaita. South India was so steeped in the ancient philosophical debate between the Vaishnavas and the Shankarites that here an ordinary newspaper was concerned with comparative philosophies. Prabhupada scoffed at the question. What is point of discussing such things? He challenged whether one is Dvaita or Advaita. Krishna says, Annat bhavanti bhutani. Anna means grain. The people have no grains. Grains are produced from the rains and rains from sacrifice. So perform sacrifice. You have to divide the society into four orders. You may be Dvaita or Advaita, but you need grains. Prabhupada's secretary wrote to Bhagwan in Paris, keeping him informed of Prabhupada's location and schedule. You can contact us here until the 20th, 29th or 30th of April, after which we will be back in Bombay. Your idea for festival sounds nice. Here they had a three-day Pandal. Last night about 1,000 people came, sat very silently through his whole lecture and then pressed forward to receive blessings from Srila Prabhupada. Devotees had the deities on stage and a Vyasasana and lots of prasadam for the guests. April 24th. From Hyderabad, Srila Prabhupada flew to Tirupati. There in mountainous Tirumala stands the richest temple in India, where a deity of Vishnu known as Balaji resides. The temple managers respectfully welcomed Srila Prabhupada and his party, providing them with 2 cottages on the mountainside. According to the temple policy, people usually have to wait in a long line before seeing the deity. Since 15,000 people entered the temple daily and they were only given a brief darshan. Yes, that time, 70s, long waiting time was there. I remember when we were little, we went there. And then we had to move from one hall to another hall to another hall. And then, yes, it was very brief darshan. Didn't know anything that time. But now they have changed a lot with all the technology. They give you a wristband, and when your time is there for darshans, I think, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes before the darshan, there's some alarm, and then one can get in the line. Non-Hindus are usually not allowed, but Srila Prabhupada and his disciples received the special honor of a private darshan of Balaji. Yes, the pujaris, when Prabhupada entered, pujaris just said, you can stand here as long as you and your disciples. They really respected Prabhupada. At the end of a long inner sanctum, its entrance guarded by two large figures of Jaya and Vijay, the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha, the deity was enthroned. The only light in the inner sanctum came from flaming torches affixed to the walls or held by the pujaris. When approaching the deity in the hallway, many pilgrims would traditionally call out, Govinda. But as Prabhupada entered, he sang, Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Later in his cottage, Prabhupada remarked that the millions of people going to see Balaji were proof that the masses are still attracted to God, despite government propaganda. Although most people may go to the Lord for alleviating material distress or for getting money, still they called out the holy name Govinda. So yes, that is actually true for all over India. But the only problem is the philosophy is missing. They, they should learn, they should understand. And that is where preachers really have to work hard. A devotee asked Prabhupada why the deity was called Balaji. Balaji, Prabhupada said, means child. Krishna as a cowherd boy, not in his Vaikuntha aspect. Prabhupada was pleased to stay in the cottage and take the deity's prasadam. He suggested that in New Vrindavan they build cottages like this and that ISKCON build temples like the temple of Balaji, with its gold dome and extensive facility for visitors. One day, an official of the Tirupati temple, while visiting Prabhupada, mentioned that their collection was about 40 lakhs of rupees per month. At that time, 1974. It is the richest temple of the world. Prabhupada inquired how the temple's income was being spent. When the priest indicated that most of the money went for renovation of the buildings, Prabhupada replied that the temple renovation was good, but propagating the message of Krishna all over the world was better. Balaji is Krishna, Prabhupada said. His message should be spread. He descended as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us. Prabhupada told the priest of how so many old churches in London were not being used. How will the spirit of the temple be maintained without preaching? Prabhupada asked. The priest then boasted that they were building another temple and installing Panchapasana, 5 deities recommended for worship by the impersonalist Shankaracharya. Prabhupada was surprised. Your leader is Ramanuja, he said. He never recommended Panchapasana. For the 2 days in Tirupati, Prabhupada went 3 or 4 times daily to see the deity of Balaji. And whenever he went, the pujaris would clear the inner sanctum of all other visitors and allow him a private darshan for as long as he liked, standing in the torchlight before the mystical, bejeweled form of Balaji. So this is how Prabhupada went there. Now this is making me crave to go take darshan of Tirupati Balaji. Bombay, April 29th. Although in a few days Prabhupada would be leaving for Rome, a problem now faced him in the management of his Indian projects. Tamal Krishna Goswami was requesting that Prabhupada allow him to go to America. After 4 years of management in India, he was eager to try a different kind of preaching. His godbrother friend Vishnujan Swami had pleased Prabhupada with his bus touring in America and had convinced Tamal Krishna that this was the most opportune preaching. Srila Prabhupada had accepted the proposal, although reluctantly. Certainly it would be good for the preaching in America and it would be good for Tamal Krishna. But what about India? Once again, Prabhupada was faced with the fact that the only manager for ISKCON in India was himself. Carefully, he reviewed a recent report of the spending and accounts in Mayapur, concerned that all money be handled very carefully and spent exactly for the purpose it was intended. He had written to Jayavataka Swami. Money for the land must be spent for land purchase. If I send money for constructing of a kitchen, it must be spent for that. Also, if you purchase land, it must be properly utilized. And if you actually produce some grains and vegetables, then where is the necessity for further money for maintenance? For maintenance, we require 100 rupees per head without any risk of purchasing lands and cultivating the same. I understand there are only 20 men there at present, so at most 2,000 rupees is necessary for maintenance. I'm not competent to understand everything concerning what you plan to do, but this is my rough estimate. So careful of the money. And another thing that Prabhupada mentioned, should spend the money for which it is collected. Very, very important. Sometimes, in the name of DT service or temple construction or other services, we get sponsors for the same item. So we let them sponsor. 3, 5 sponsors are there for the same item. But I mean, honestly speaking, that's not very honest. If somebody has sponsored, suppose DT dress, how can we take money from other sponsors for the same thing? There could be different items we can ask, but not for the same thing. It's it's just morally it's not correct. And do we not have faith in Krishna that he will bring the money? Why we have to play these games? You have tried to explain my long letter, which I have not gone through yet. In the meantime, go on the above principle. Money spent must be used for that purpose intended. That will keep it very clear. From a previous letter from Srila Prabhupada, Bhavanand and Jayapataka had become little despondent, thinking that they may have displeased the spiritual master. But Prabhupada reassured them, I know you are working hard and sincerely. I have no business to criticize, but as head of the institution or your spiritual master, it is my duty to find out your faults. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu presented himself as faulty before his spiritual master. To remain faulty before the spiritual master is a good qualification, so he is subjected to rectification. But if one thinks he is all perfect, then there is no scope for rectification. Don't be sorry when I find fault. That is my primary duty. Chanakya Pandit says one must find fault with disciples and sons. It's good for them. So yes, Prabhupada, spiritual master, head of the institution, he had to make sure his disciples and followers they are on the right track. But as Prabhupada said, finding fault for their rectification, not to put them down or discourage them. That's there's a purpose for finding faults. And in the right way, if they're shown the faults or mistakes and try to correct them. That's the proper way of making advancement. And this is what Prabhupada was doing. Prabhupada also scrutinized the finances in Vrindavan, where Gurudas was president and Tejas in Delhi was financial supervisor. Reviewing Tejas's latest request, Prabhupada wrote back, I'm enclosing the list of checks requested by you to register by registered post, except I'm not sending one check for rupees 3,000 for DT clothes to be paid to the tailor Lalit Prasad of Vrindavan. DT paraphernalia is supposed to be collected separately by Gurudas and Yamuna, not come out of the construction funds as you have requested. Besides, I have advised Gurudas not to pay any tailor, but to make clothes by our own devotees for the deities. Prabhupada also found a serious inconsistency in the accounting, which he pointed out to Tejas for correction. According to my checkbook, after writing the last check of rupees 1,76,000, there is a balance of only rupees 18,745.81. But you are indicating a balance of rupees 1,313,64. Where is the difference? Send me a complete statement of accounts, a huge difference in the balances. Gurudas and Tejas had assured Prabhupada that the Krishna Balram Mandir would be ready to open by July 1974. Prabhupada designed the invitation cards himself and asked that they be printed and sent to important persons. The founder Acharya and the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness request the pleasure of Mr. and Mrs. So company to visit the installation ceremony of the Krishna Balaram temple from August 8 to 10 and accept prasad. Gurudas Adhikari, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami, local president. So he himself designed the invitation card. With only 3 months left, Prabhupada's plans were to travel from May through July, giving permission for transferring funds from Delhi to Vrindavan. He left. He would return in 3 months for the grand opening. Okay, this ends the chapter 33. Tomorrow we can start the new chapter. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai
Hare
Shri Prabhupada.
Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.